first and foremost, Senator, thank you very much for coming on, and congratulations on your beautiful baby girl. I saw the pictures on Dr. Shea's Facebook, and congratulations on getting into the 36.
Thank you, thank you.
So definitely won't take up too much of your time, but before we move on to the Cannabis Control Board, which is a pretty hot topic for everybody, you seem to have hit the ground running already. Within the 5 days of January, you introduced 2 bills, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yes.
So,
Those 2 bills introduced are, just to be clear, actually I'm reintroducing bills that I introduced in the last term that did not make it to session floor because they were never reported out of their committee. So reintroducing them with the hopes that we can get them out of their committees and get a committee report so that we can move them on the session floor. And those 2 bills are, I believe one is the back-billing ban, and that's to ban the practice of back-billing by GPA and GWA. And the other bill is, shoot, one moment, I'm trying to remember what the second bill is. So it's the back-billing ban, and I forget what the second bill is off the top of my head. I apologize, because there was another bill I was supposed to reintroduce.
the back billing was 9, right?
Yeah, I believe so. And then
Yeah, and then 10 would be relative to increasing the aggregate capacity limit for net energy measurement calculation.
oh yes, the NEM bill. Yes, that's the other one. So it's the NEM bill, and what that one does is we had a public hearing on that bill, but we weren't able to get it to the session floor. That was actually held in my committee. So I just wasn't able to get to the session floor on time because we had to do some things with the bill to sort of get some more information is what we're working on with that NEM bill. What that bill does is it would allow more, so what net energy metering customers are, they're basically renewable energy customers. So people, particularly solar customers, so people that have solar panels on their homes right now, what they do is they get a credit on their power bill. If they're in the NEM program, their power bill gets credited based on how much excess power they feed back into the system that GPA can then use to sell to other customers. So GPA did have some issues with the bill. The PUC and the CCU had some issues with the bill. So we're taking a look at the bill again to see if we can address some of those issues.
Awesome. And I guess now on to.
Go for it. Yeah.
Go ahead. Are you still have some more to add to that?
Only if you had more questions about it, I'm free to answer.
Well, I think one of the big things is everybody's wondering about the CCB, and so I know we've been in communication here and there, and it really does seem a little bit like a he said she said kind of thing. Well, in this case, he said, especially when it comes to the study not study, and
Mm-hmm.
so if you can clear that up, as far as GVB was told to have the study. They shall have the study, right? That's the language. And for the most part, it was their opportunity to conduct a study by their parameters, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
That was the point of the whole study, yeah. So I can start back from the beginning, how this all came about. GVB did have concerns with the Cannabis Industry Act in the beginning. I'll give them that. That's fair, that's true. Their concern was what the potential impacts would be to the tourism industry. So what we said in the legislature is we added in the bill, we basically said, fine, if you guys are concerned about it, do a study on it. By all means, do a study on it. In fact, we mandated that they do a study on it within, I believe it was 90 days of the enactment of the law, study the impacts, and we said, GVB, you determine the parameters of this study. So you figure out how do you want to conduct the study, what the parameters are, so you can study what the potential impacts would be to tourism. So that way we would know what the potential impacts could be to tourism. And if you have any concerns, that's where the concerns should be studied in that economic impact assessment. So the law passes, when we got to the when the rules got to the when the board started working on the rules, I remember clearly that there were certain times when the board mentioned to GVB, because GVB has a board member. They actually have two board members on. So they mentioned to the GVB board member, hey, please check with GVB. You guys are supposed to do an economic impact study. The board member came back and said, we don't know what study we're supposed to do. The reason I remember this clearly is because the board turned and looked at me and asked me, Senator, you're the author of the bill. Do you know what kind of study they're supposed to do? And I said, no, they're the ones who wanted the study. They should know what kind of study they want to do. Like, they didn't know what parameters, they didn't know how to study it. They were concerned that they can't study the potential impacts because the industry hasn't been stood up yet. And I said, well, I don't know. They're the ones who wanted to study the potential impacts. So they asked for it. They should do it. They should know what to do. The GVB board member goes back to GVB. This happened more than once, and come back again and say, we're not sure how to study. Eventually, they just came up with something, and they said, okay, we think we can get a study going. And they hired tourism company, I believe called Tourism Economics, if I'm not mistaken. Hired them, paid for them. GVB determined the parameters of the study as they were supposed to. And then that is the study that shows positive impacts from legalizing cannabis. That's the study that shows the potential for more tourism dollars, the potential for more jobs. That study does not show any potential loss in revenue. So my question is, why isn't it in that study? Instead, what you have is months later, GVB coming back and now producing a study that I don't know what their methodology was for the study at all, producing some sort of numbers or figures saying, oh, we're going to lose 100% of this visitor market. We're going to lose 50% in this visitor market. And they're all based on assumptions, and there's no real methodology to how they determine those percentages. So that's what I have a real problem with, is that, they did a study already. And now they're saying, oh, no, that study wasn't good enough. So now they've done another study. My take on it is I think they did a study. I think they don't like the results of the first study. So now they made up their own numbers. That's my take on
it. With regards to the study, there's been people saying that it's a little too late for GVB. They had their opportunity to conduct the study the right time, the first way around. And according to Jerry Perez and CCB board member Teresa Ariola from KUAM Behavioral Health, regardless of the time, if their argument has substance, then it should be heard.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay, so if they have substance, that's a good point. Substance. Where's the substance of their study? Where's the methodology? How did they determine those percentages would be lost in those markets? Yeah, show us the methodology, because I'll tell you what, the study that they paid for did share the methodology, and that study is several pages long. All I've ever seen from GVB is like an email that's like 1 page long that says, this is how much money we're going to lose. And where's the methodology? How'd you determine that? Instead, the study that they commissioned and paid for fully explains their methodology.
And so in the recent CCB board meeting, they had people from land management kind of sector out the whole Tumon area to see the H zones, the commercial zones and whatnot. And so from what they were saying, it's like, it's hard enough in Tumon to set up a cannabis facility as it is. And if GVB and everybody else in Tumon is like they say they are, all hand in hand, arm in arm locked, we don't want cannabis in Tumon, then there should be no need for anything else, because they wouldn't lease anything to a cannabis business, period.
That's right. So what it is the law prohibits any cannabis business from being within 1,000 feet of any daycare, any school, any church, any public park. In Tumon, you've got at least 2 major public parks. You've got Ipao Beach Park on one end of Tumon, and then you've got Matapang Beach Park in the middle sort of Tumon. So you can't have 1,000 feet around on either side of those, and I think that basically takes up at least half of Tumon. if not probably more than half of the Tumon Strip. And then you also have a church down in Tumon that's a little further away from a topping beach park. That extends that 1,000 feet even farther. And then not too long after that, you've got the Pleasure Island area where you've got Baldiga's businesses and other businesses that if they've already said they don't want cannabis, they just won't lease their space to cannabis businesses. So really, I don't know where a cannabis business would. And if they would, there's only very few options of where they would potentially lease it. So it's not like there's going to be cannabis businesses all up and down the strip. No, in fact, they won't be allowed in most places. And it's going to be very hard to find a place to have. So even if there was the opportunity, maybe you'd see one cannabis shop at the most down there. If that, there might not even be any. I haven't gone and looked myself to see if there's any places available where they would have it, but where there's a place available where they're willing to lease it and it's 1,000 feet away from all those other places that are prohibited, like the public parks and the churches. So there might not even be any room for it in Tumon at all. My biggest issue is why limit it any further? You know, if there's one guy down in Tumon that has a business and he wants to open a shop and it's away from the public parks and it's away from the church, and there's one place in Tumon that wants to have a shop, why prevent them from having a shop down there? Why prevent a legitimate business from being down there? If their issue is they're concerned about the wrong image to the tourists, you know, I don't think one shop down there is going to be the wrong image to the tourists, especially if there's already many laws limiting how cannabis can be marketed anyway. You're not allowed to like advertise it in those markets, for example. You wouldn't be able to go to Japan and Korea and market Guam as a tourism destination anyway. And no one is asking to go with GVB on their junkets to Japan and Korea. No one's asking to go along with them to market cannabis there. No, they go and market what they normally market over there. And for those tourists in Japan and Korea who happen to find out that there's legal cannabis on Guam and they happen to be interested in that, they can come over. I don't think it's going to chase anyone away from Tumon. And you know what? The proof is in the pudding. And here's what the pudding shows you. The pudding shows you that more than a year after we legalized cannabis was legalized in April of 2019. We're here in 2020. Excuse me, it's not more than a year, but it's been several months. April of 2019, cannabis was legalized. It's now 2020, and 2019 was our best year for tourism on record. Best year. In fact, August was the best month of 2019. August, after cannabis was legalized. So if the legalization of cannabis was going to scare away tourists, it would have done it already, but it hasn't. Instead, we had record numbers of tourists after cannabis was legalized, which to me is proof that cannabis will not scare tourists away from Guam. If anything, GVB is the one scaring tourists away from Guam.
You know, the whole concept of we need to maintain a family-friendly Guam in the eyes of our tourist partners. And it does seem a little bit, you know, if I may, hypocritical that in Tumon we have a giant sign that says G-Spot, and we're worried about a family-friendly image, you know. But as far as what happened in the CCB meeting, I believe Adrian Cruz and Will Parkinson kind of echoed the same sentiments as far as there are a lot of Chamorro landowners in Tumon, or not a lot, but there still are landowners in Tumon, and it does take away from that whole American ethos of I can do whatever I please with my property and pursue my own economic liberties, you know?
Absolutely, 100%. Who is GVB to tell us, the people of Guam, what can and can't be in Tumon as long as it's legal? What's next? They're going to ban dogs from Tumon? Oh, we don't want dogs in Tumon because tourists are afraid of dog poop. Is that what's next? Who is GVB to tell us what's allowed in Tumon and what's not?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, to see what kind of middle ground we can have, if any. Do you see anything like that in the future? Do you think that it'll sort itself out, or is this something where GVB will come back knocking at your door once the rules and regulations are finished?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. And that's another thing too. No one from GVB has reached out to me to talk to me about any of this. So we'll see.
Well, one person from GVB, I just had a Zoom with him, and he said, "I applaud Senator Ridgell for his tenacity and his drive and his willingness to follow through with this bill. Pretty much, because the bill was your baby at that." And so he's saying, as a senator, a sitting senator, that you should be more focused on the bigger picture as opposed to just kind of that narrow vision.
Yeah, the bigger picture is, the bigger picture is cannabis is legal, and why should we try to limit it any more than it's already limited? That's the bigger picture.
Yeah, what Will Parkinson said was, if we're going to look at anything, let's just look at the law. The law says what it says. It has these restrictions already in place. Why not
Mm-hmm.
just follow the law?
Yep, there's many restrictions already.
Well, I hope we figure this out soon. And thank you so much for your time, Senator. I truly appreciate it. Look forward to solving this, and maybe we can see some businesses pop up in Tumon, help us recover.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator.